You have seen in the first episode that the atmosphere of the Earth, meaning the air, is not able to lift, hold, and move flying objects in a way that make them appear as a cohesive one-piece body. Also, gravity cannot repel objects flying in the leading path of the Earth. Neither inertia can keep flying things moving and synchronized with the Earth for hours and hours. So if the Earth is moving, things flying away from the Earth must remain behind a few seconds after being separated from the Earth. Now we will see 13 proofs of Imam Ahmad Raza disproving the orbit of the Earth. 5 of them will be in this episode and the rest will be in upcoming episodes, inshallah. Let's first see what is the notion of science about orbits. When an object moves in a circular path, it experiences a centrifugal force that propels or pushes it away from the circular path. For instance, when swinging a ball or a rock using a rope, the greater the force you apply, the more the ball will try to break free from the circular path. If it is able to break free, it will go in a straight line. This force always propels the object along the tangent of the circle, which is perpendicular to the radius at a 90-degree angle. All planets, including Earth, orbit in the same way. Gravity pulls them towards the Sun, while this force drives them along a path perpendicular to the Sun's gravitational pull. As a result, Earth ends up going on neither side and lies perfectly in the middle of both the forces. As it continues further, the same thing happens again. Gravity pulls it towards the Sun, while the Earth tries to move along a perpendicular path, but it ends up taking neither side, resulting in a balanced path right in between. This repetition forms a continuous circular route, which we call the orbit of the Earth. The circular orbit we see is actually made up of countless tiny arcs of the resultant force. These two forces that shape the orbit are always in balance. If either of them is greater than the other, the Earth would go with it. If gravity, for example, is greater, then the Earth would go to the Sun, and if centrifugal force is greater, Earth would escape the orbit. Imam Ahmad Raza claims that these two forces combined can never form an orbit. Let's see how. Make a triangle with the magnitude of gravity and resultant force. Now in this triangle ABC, Imam geometrically proves that the angle C is the biggest angle and also an obtuse angle. So the resultant force lies in between the right angle. Therefore, this angle is half of it, 45 degrees. Which means that the remaining two angles combined are 135 degrees, since the total of all three angles in any triangle is 180 degrees. And this angle B depends on the opposite side of it, side AC. This side AC is actually the same arc that forms the entire orbit. According to modern science, combinations of arcs like this are able to form a fine smooth circle despite it being a straight line because it is so small. Now this side AC being super small entails that angle B would be very small, even smaller than 1 degree. Now this would mean that the angle C is about 134 degrees, which means it is in fact the biggest angle of the triangle. Even if we were not to calculate like this, angle C being the biggest angle is obvious and visible. Now we also know that the opposite side of biggest angle is the longest side. Hence the side AB lying opposite of the biggest angle C is the longest side. Now this means that the side CB is smaller than side AB. And Earth moved from point A to point C, so the distance between the Sun and the Earth, which was AB, now becomes CB. Which means Earth got closer to the Sun. And the same would continue to happen further, that the distance would become from CB to DB, which is even shorter than before. This entails that the Earth must not make a circle, rather it would make a spiral path into the Sun and vanish. Now you might think, well, then how do the rope and the ball swing using these two forces? Now Imam Ahmad Raza says that actually 4 forces are acting on the ball to make circular motion happen. The first is the repulsive force that you applied when you initially projected the ball and the rope. The function of this force is to project an object along a straight path. Second is the directing force. It is used to change the direction of the applied force every moment. Third is the binding force applied using the rope. It keeps the ball from exceeding a specific boundary. And finally, the lifting force that is applied to raise it from the ground. The ball moved onto a tangential path due to the repulsive force you applied initially. The function of this force, by the way, is to project an object on a straight path. So when you threw the ball initially, it would have gone straight, but you changed its direction using the directing force and restricted the movement of the ball with the binding force using the rope. Now this made it appear as though the ball was moving in a circular path. The harder you swing the rope, the greater the repulsive force will be that you applied, the more forcefully the ball will be assumed to escape. It is not the force of the ball nor the demand of the ball. The force that you see in the ball was the effect of the repulsive force that you applied. So in short, just these two forces are not enough in order to form a circular motion in an orbit. There has to be a directing force on the Earth that keeps guiding it along the path of the orbit. Also, there has to be a binding force that does not let the Earth physically go beyond a limit. And most importantly, there must be a constant repulsive force that would keep propelling the Earth on a straight path. Because this force that is believed to be acting on the Earth has no evidence whatsoever. We'll talk about that in the end of the video. So in other words, forces required to make circular motion are absent in Earth's orbit. Hence, such a bad example of rope and the ball is not enough proof for Earth's orbit, and the orbit of the Earth is therefore a false idea. Imam Ahmad Raza further says, even if we were to believe that both the forces are not exactly equal, orbits still can be formed. Let's assume that the gravity and centrifugal force are not the same amount. Gravity is so weak that it will make the resultant force go up a little, and so this angle C will be smaller than before, resulting in increasing the distance between the Earth and the Sun. But the orbit is so unfortunate that even this wouldn't allow it to form. No matter how small you assume these forces to be, their resultant force will always lie in between them. If the resultant force lie in between them, then angle C in triangle ABC will always be the largest angle. This means side AB will always be a longer side than CB, meaning the Earth will always move towards the smaller side. Hence the distance between the Sun and the Earth will always reduce no matter what. If we were to make the side CB longer, the angle C has to be much smaller, and in order for that to happen, the resultant force has to be higher than where the tangent is. But in order to achieve that, there has to be another force, just the opposite side of the gravity, and that does not exist. In short, angle C will always be greatest, and therefore side AB will be the longest, and so the Earth will spiral into the Sun sooner or later. You might think, but still, what if these forces somehow manage to keep the Earth exactly on the border of the orbit, neither moving out nor in? Meaning, if the resultant force somehow stays right on the tangent, then the distance between the Sun and the Earth will always be equal to side AB. This won't make a spiral path into the Sun. Okay, let's assume that Earth remains exactly on its orbit, maintaining the same distance to the Sun. But the problem here is, if this were to form an orbit, it would make a perfectly circular orbit. But the orbit of the Earth actually is not a perfect circle, it's elliptical. Throughout the year, Earth moves 5 million kilometers away from the Sun and then returns by the same distance. If the distance between Earth and the Sun were always the same, the orbit would be circular, not elliptical. Johannes Kepler spent 8 years in painstaking observation and then figured that the orbits are elliptical, not circular. From that point until now, it has been widely accepted by modern science that the orbit of the Earth is elliptical and the Sun is not in the center of the ellipse. Every year on January 3rd, Earth is closest to the Sun. From that point, it moves farther away until July 3rd, adding 5 million kilometers between the Sun and the Earth. Then it starts getting closer to the Sun until January 3rd, returning to exactly where it was on January 3rd last year. So therefore, it is against the reality to believe that the Earth keeps the same distance from the Sun, as this way it would form a perfectly circular orbit, whereas the orbit is actually elliptical. In a nutshell, with these two forces, orbit can never be formed no matter what. Exactly as the Imam said, Gravity and centrifugal force holding each other's collars can never form an orbit whatsoever. Now let us proceed to the next proof. Imam Ahmad Raza says that the centrifugal force is the outcome of the circular motion and thus arises after the circular motion is done. But when there was no orbit, there was no circular motion. Without circular motion, there was no centrifugal force. So where did this force come from? It only manifests after movement in a circular path. When the Earth was not moving in a circular path, there couldn't have been a centrifugal force in the first place. There is no proof or evidence given for this. It is assumed that when the solar system was getting formed, Earth was thrown into space and it would have continued to go straight, but the sun must have come in its way and the gravity must have formed the orbit this way. Imam Ahmad Raza says that the task of fact cannot be fulfilled by fiction. An argument seeker cannot be satisfied with maybe or prediction. When something is proven either by witnessing it or with evidence, and its cause is also specified, but there is some ambiguity about it, and the ambiguity can be dispelled in some ways, but it is unknown which of the ways actually occurred. That is where we can use an assumption and say it might be this way or that way or that way. But when something is not proven in the first place, like how this force on Earth is not proven, neither has been witnessed, nor there is any evidence behind it. If we introduce another assumption to prove this assumed force, will it prove it? No. In such a disproven fact, there is no place for assumption at all. If we were to assume like this, it would totally depend on our assumption and guess. If we assume, then the Earth was going in space, and if we don't, it wasn't. Science is based on fact and logic, not on myths and guesses. Such guesses might be enough for school children, but are definitely not for actual rational mind. Building an entire solar system cannot be based on mere assumptions and guesswork. But here's the funny fact. Even if we assume that this force existed, still the orbit of the Earth can't be formed. These are 5 out of 13 proofs Imam has presented refuting the orbit of the Earth. You'll be able to see more in upcoming episodes. Until then, help us spread the message of Imam Ahmad Raza. And if you have any question or comments, please let us know about that. Assalamu alaikum.